2 years. I am looking at 2 years in prison for leading chants of deport, stop the boats and send them home. The only reason they are doing this right now, the only reason they are attacking political dissidents and journalists is because they want to silence us, and they're not going to silence us. We are fighting back for free speech.
Speech is definitely a theme on my show of late. I'm Melanie Bennett for True North. I'm here in Norwich at Riverside. I'm about to meet a British patriot who's been involved in the anti-migrant movements, but he's also an independent journalist, and he's been involved in covering many of the stories across the country, but also here in Norwich. And we've had a few conversations, and I really thought it'd be interesting to bring his perspective to you. There are so many similarities between Britain and Canada, and I think you're going to find that too. For True North, I'm Melanie Bennett. I'm here with James Harvey. I've been wanting to talk to you for quite some time. So just to start off the conversation, one of the things I find most interesting, you were the first person I actually reached out to when I was coming to Norwich, because I'd noticed you're an independent journalist for Vox Populi, who go around covering all of these different migrant protests, but also other political issues, right? And you guys have been covering and participating in the migrant protests here in Norwich.
Yep.
So there's been some issues with that, but maybe we'll get into it. But can you just sort of describe in your own words what you've been up to?
Well, so, I mean, let's go way back, right? So I'm not just an investigative journalist. I actually started as an activist. I started when I founded Students Against Tyranny. And then from there, I kind of got involved with Unity News Network, Voice of Wales. And after moving out of Wales, I then got involved with Vox Populi, Urban Scoop, and those other organisations. And I'm kind of an independent activist as well. But I think I was talking to you about this. I know, journalists are meant to be kind of in the middle, neutral and impartial. But from my experience and the kind of work that I do, what I cover, by being a journalist, you're also an activist, right?
Yeah, you asked me that, and I didn't know how to respond to it. Was I an activist? That's a tough question.
It is, but if you look at someone like Tommy Robinson, right? The kind of journalism he does, where he exposes migrant gangs, but then he also organises massive marches to showcase his documentaries.
Yeah.
I would also consider that activism. So it's a very kind of fine line. But my heart these days is kind of drifting more towards journalism. I'm absolutely in love with journalism, investigative journalism. There's a few big projects that I'm working on at the moment, from Edinburgh and stuff like that. But yeah, my heart's kind of dwindling more towards
But you've had consequences for your journalism.
Absolutely. I mean, if we go back 2-3 years ago, talking about migrant hotels, we used to expose a lot of the migrant hotels in Wales. And the way we do this is actually quite easy. Anyone can do it at home. And it's literally, you'd go online, you'd find out hotels near you, and you'd find out which one is closed permanently or indefinitely. Those are the ones typically that are being used to house illegal immigrants, right? So we'd actually go to these hotels, and the way we'd find out is it's easy. You'd see security at the front. That's how you know it's a migrant hotel. And then we'd go and confront the security. We'd go to have a conversation with them. And I remember one time I referred to illegal immigrants at one of these hotels as undocumented aliens, which is quite politically correct. I'm not sure if it's the same in Canada. I know it is in America, but aliens means immigrant.
I've never heard that people use that in Britain. That tends to be an American term. Canadians don't use it so much.
Yeah, right. So it's a legal term for immigrants, yes. Aliens, right? But I was
not of this country.
Yeah, not of this country. Yeah. Different. That's why alien means extraterrestrial, means different.
Yeah.
And I remember getting I didn't get a phone call. The police turned up at my parents' house. I didn't know what it was about. So I'd rung up 101. This was all filmed this was all filmed and posted on the Bad Law Team's Twitter. I rung up 101, and they connected me with the officer in question. Turns out they had what you call local intel officers, which is a big thing here in the UK. Local intel officers who basically watched my video, and no one had complained about.
Are they police? Is this part of the police?
Yeah, so they're employed by the police. They're paid by the taxpayer, and their entire job is to watch people like mine content. Etc. Every local content.
So naughty social media.
Naughty social media. Yeah. That's a perfect way of describing them, right? And no one had actually complained about me saying undocumented aliens, but it's like, I'm just watching a video now, you're going to have to take that down. And I said, well, what about all the people calling me a Nazi every day on Twitter? And he backtracked quite quickly. So, we've had this kind of back and forwards with the police for quite a while in the UK in terms of them being very, very, very anti-free speech, policing your thoughts, policing your opinions. And, it's kind of accumulated in what happened recently, where loads of us in Norwich, in Epping, in Altrincham, etc., have been arrested and charged for social media posts or for saying words.
Okay, so let's get on to that, because one of the first conversations I had with you was about how you were arrested on the basis of your speech and now facing charges. And I was hoping that you might describe that, but I wasn't aware that this was across the other more well-known protests like Epping.
Oh, I mean, in protests like Epping, right, is a little bit different. What police are doing these days is they've got the Public Order Act, and the Public Order Act is one of the main ways they control your free speech and your right to protest, right? So in Epping, for example, they've passed something called Section 14. And the Section 14 basically says that you've got to protest inside a designated protest area. You've got to finish at a certain time. And if you don't, you will be arrested.
So we saw that in Norwich on Sunday, where they separated the protesters and counter-protesters,
Yes.
and they were completely separated, even by a plastic barrier. Like,
Yeah.
there was no contact between them whatsoever.
They're not allowed to these days, right? So like in Epping, there was a woman called Sarah who flew a British flag outside the designated protest area. She was arrested and charged, and she's looking at prison time for that, right? I went to a protest recently in Colchester and Braintree, where the police, there'd never been there has been protests up there before, but there's never been any issues. There's never been any trouble. They passed the Section 14, despite there not being grounds to do so, right? And we were told if we did not protest inside the designated protest area, if we did not give speeches inside that area, we would be arrested, right? So it's kind of a big thing at the moment, and now they're doing it in Norwich, right? So they've got a way of controlling the protest, and then they've got a way of controlling your speech. The way they control your speech is through Section 4A, right? So Section 4A is intent to cause alarm and distress, right? So you don't even need to cause alarm and distress, really.
Intent to cause alarm and distress. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they don't need evidence of you causing alarm and distress. They just need your intent to do so.
How do they know your intent?
This is the difficult thing. They've got to prove. Well, it's not about proving what your intent is. It's more about proving what you were going to say, right? So, like I said, foreign filth.
Yeah.
So that's what I said. I mean, if we go,
because let's be honest, you were rude at the end of the day. Your speech was rude, but it's still speech. It's impolite speech, I think, as Ezra would put it. Ezra Levant, I think I've heard him say that. Oh no, David Menzies as well. But it's so it's not the nicest speech, but at the end of the day, it is. In fact, speech. Like, from what I understand, you weren't necessarily inciting violence. It's not what you were.
No, I mean, so the entire backstory to that was I was at a protest in Diss at the Park Hotel. Now that hotel was another one me and my girlfriend exposed 2 years ago, right? And at that hotel, originally it was housing women and kids, which is why I never organised a protest. Because to be honest with you, I'm more accepting of women and kids if they're immigrants, right? I'm fine with that. But,
well, just to put in some context, with the migrant hotels, as far as I understand, there are two in Norwich. There's one which is all males, which will have all the protests, and one that has women and children. And I don't think anyone's protesting there.
No, it's not an issue with us. There's a more to us. There's what you consider refugees more than the all men that are coming over. Yeah. And I think they're saying 75% of the. I think it's more realistically that coming over are men, right? You will never see. It's very rare to see women and kids coming over, right? Yeah. But what is it? So we
your speech. I want to know about your speech crimes.
Well, this is it, right? So they were going to take the women and kids out of the hotel, and they were going to replace them with all men. Now, this is a very old community. So we thought, well, I didn't think this, but it was thought by the locals, let's organise a protest. Over 150 turned up. I went there. I went there in the capacity of an activist that day. I wasn't planning on giving any speeches, but I brought down the PA system, and because the guys who were organising it were kind of newbies, I kind of ended up, hosting the demo on the speaker, right? Now, I remember hearing something from the left that white people rape as well. And that always gets to me because, yes, white people rape as well, but this is a white country.
Yeah.
You're going to have white people committing rape, and we do have a massive issue in this country with white people committing rape. But if that's the case, why do we need to import more of the same? Just because white people rape in a white country, why do we need to import more illegal immigrants who continue on with the exact same behaviour? So when I said foreign filth, I was on about those coming over in boats who rape our kids, right? If anyone watching this at home considers pedophiles from abroad to be filth, is
that the argument that because Britain has pedophiles, then we should allow migrant pedophiles to also be in Britain?
Yeah, I don't believe that.
Equal rights.
Exactly. I don't believe that. And that's what I'm saying. So that's the foreign filth part. But they said that I was intending on causing alarm and distress. But this is the thing. So I got the initial details of the prosecution case, and in that there was no victim statements, none.
But let's just be clear. You're facing 2 years in prison.
Originally,
So you're no longer?
no.
Okay.
So originally I was facing 2 years in prison, charged with Section 4A of the Crime and Disorder Act, and in Section 4A, that's a 2-year prison sentence. So if you get charged with that, which can literally be for something like you're not English anymore at police officers. There was a man who went down for 18 months for that. I believe it was 18 months anyway.
For saying you're not English anymore?
To police officers, yeah. So, that's the main section they like charging people with. And then you've got Section 14 as well, which controls protests. So in this country, you don't have a right to free speech. You don't have a right to your own opinion. You don't have a right to freedom of expression. You don't have a right to protest. They control these protests. And, that's something...
So these all the things that you're naming, just to be very clear, these are the fundamentals of a liberal democratic society.
Yes.
The freedom of association, the freedom of expression, the freedom to be treated, it's not really freedom, but to be treated equally under the law.
Yeah.
So all of these things are the fundamental principles of of liberty. And,
exactly.
And these are the things that are now being controlled. Is that what you're saying? Is that fair to say?
Yes. You have these in the Constitution in America, but what a lot of people forget is that not just the Constitution in America, but the New Zealand one as well, they were based off the English Constitution. We've got our own Constitution spread among many different documents.
Well, it's an unwritten Constitution of the Magna Carta.
Magna Carta, Bill of Rights.
Gives Englishmen all of these rights.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And those are being eroded.
Yeah,
obviously.
well, the Magna Carta, if you were to use that in a courtroom these days, or the Bill of Rights, they would laugh at you. They would laugh at you, right? Common law, any of our constitutional rights, we don't have in the UK anymore. They've been overwritten with tons of these new laws. And the main one these days that they're using to infringe upon our freedoms is stuff like the Public Order Act, is stuff like the Crime and Disorder Act, right? So we don't really have any rights. And the problem is your speech it's more serious when it's racially aggravated. So I don't know if you've heard of that, racial aggravation.
Yeah.
So racial aggravation is what they used against me. They said because your speech was motivated by race, ethnicity, religion, then it's classed as racial aggravation. And because of that, it goes from a 6-month prison sentence to a 2-year
Yeah, so let's not just be clear. We're not just talking about speech crimes. We're talking about identity aggravated speech crimes, which then holds, I imagine, a longer sentence or a potential longer sentence.
Yeah. And, talking about identity crimes, right, they've got... So you'll be aware, because I know you've been covering a bit of this, there are people going around the Norwich at the moment who are putting up flags. Yeah. And that's not just Norwich, that's all over the UK.
I just want to add context. So that's the raise of flags. This is where English people are putting up England flags, mostly not the Union flag, mostly England, St. George Cross, or Scottish people putting up the Scottish flag, or Welsh people putting up the Welsh flag to signify that they're protecting their country. This is like a assertion of a national identity.
Right? You see the Palestine and Ukrainian flag everywhere, even over our council buildings.
And there's a trans flag just just up the road.
So you have every flag but the Union flag and the England flag everywhere, right? So people are going around taking our country back, and they're putting up all of these England flags, these Union flags, these Welsh flags, these Scottish flags, and they're being vilified for it. I know of 2 people in Norwich who have now been banned from being anywhere near a flag.
Well, I was told that along the Durham Road, close to the protest, there were all these flags, these St. George Cross, the cross flags, that were put up on the road near the hotel, and those were taken down, I believe, 3 times. It might be 2, I think it's 3. And every time the Patriot movement decided to put those flags back up even higher, they keep getting taken down. Yep. So those flags are not allowed to be flown, but that is the ancient flag of the English people. I don't know exactly how old the St. George Cross is. I think it's over 1,000 years old at this point. It's a very old flag. It really does designate English identity. Now, I'll just add a little bit of context, because there has been for some time this association with football hooliganism, and I think that possibly some people are willing to associate the St. George Cross with racists because of this preconceived notion. But that's not what's happening right now. What's happening right now is a national renewal of people who are just trying to...
Finding their identity.
They're trying to find their identity. Yeah. So it's not that. But I see why it's easy for some people to look at that and think this is some kind of racist uprising, right? I don't think that's going to be the case in the long run. But yeah, you are seeing people who are very willing to completely... I mean, we saw a police officer, I believe it was in Liverpool, rip the flag off a 16-year-old girl just a few days ago, right? And refused to give it back. She wasn't near anybody. She was just holding the flag. She wasn't bothering anybody, but that police officer could not allow her to hold the flag of her country.
Yeah, so I was there at that demo. There was a UKIP demo in Newcastle, then you had the Advanced Conference as well. And so just behind the police officer who ripped down the Union flag, you had the Communist flag, the trans flag, etc. Did he rip those down? No. So there's a massive thing at the moment where, you know, I mean, for example, they're calling us, their favourite term is to call us flag shaggers, right? But this is coming from a group of people who has to have 50 flags to show off their sexual identity, right? So the idea that it can be racist to fly your own Union flag, your own English flag, to me is absolutely despicable. Absolutely despicable. But that's something we've seen a lot more of. You know, so talking about the Section 4A, intent to cause alarm and distress, you know it's also illegal to fly a Union flag outside a mosque.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so if you went outside a mosque, for example, there's one in Durham Road, if you went outside a mosque and you put up a flag, you know, put up your Union flag.
Is it illegal to fly a Islamic flag?
No, you can have terrorism.
Church?
I mean,
Can you fly a Hamas flag in front of a church?
Not Hamas. Technically, if it's prescribed, it's illegal. But we've seen...
We see those everywhere, though.
Well, we've seen from countless times. I mean, in Luton, they're walking around doing these massive terrorism marches with ISIS flags, and the police don't do anything. It was actually down to Tommy during the EDL days to rip it off one of the Islamic protesters. So there is I mean, while they say it's illegal because, you know, it's a prescribed terrorist organization, they do still allow it.
What you're saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're acting upon one side, but not necessarily the other.
But that's deliberate. I mean, you may have seen it as well. I mean, I think we were talking about this earlier. But what they do is, so, you know, we talk about Hegelian dialect, problem, reaction, solution. What they do is, if they target one side, say the right wing, they target the right wing for free speech, for things they say online, and then people go, oh, well, Narinder Kaur said something who was similar, why wasn't she arrested? And so you now got the right wing, who are notoriously pro-free speech, arguing against free speech. So that's how they do it, right? They target one side, now the other side, now they're arguing for anti-free speech laws against the other side, right? So there is a massive, that's what they do, and that's the reason they do it. Yeah.
Well, there is a movement in England, not just among activist class or working class, people who feel like they're not being heard, to have more freedom of expression. So that exists. But do you get a sense that that's pretty common throughout the entire country? Because here in Norwich, just to give a bit of context, Norwich is quite middle class, quite polite for the most part. Not everywhere, but it has this era, like progressivism and liberalism is very well accepted for the most part. I mean, that might be changing in some ways, but that is the general gist of Norwich. People don't like to be confrontational. People kind of want to go with the flow, right? Do you feel that there's a sense that the wider population are fed up? Like, they do actually want to be able to speak their minds. They don't want to be arrested on the basis of their speech. Are you feeling that perhaps many of the people are like, well, maybe you shouldn't have been impolite?
I think the majority in the UK at the moment is very much on our side. And it's been that way for a while, but finally the British people are finding their voice. Yeah. The reason that you hear about the left all the time is because they are a very vocal but very small community. I mean, we saw in London, there was, what we estimated was about 400,000 people, you know, who marched for Unite the Kingdom. And the opposition was about 5,000. There is a lot more. I mean, it depends, right? 'Cause when out of universities, we're getting a lot more left-wing students. But those people eventually grow up, they get a job, and they stop being, you know, socialists.
Maybe. I'm a millennial who went to the UEA, the university here, and I most definitely was educated in a very progressive environmental career path. And I held those progressive values. I thought everybody believed the same thing as I did until I hit a wall. But that's a whole other story. We're not here for me. Yeah. But those are the kinds of people that end up in positions of authority. What we see in Canada is the well-heeled university graduates who are among other people who believe the same that they do, and they assume everybody does. And we see this with the Labour Party. There seems to be this sense that they believe that they are correct, they are righteous, they know the true path, and everybody else is wrong. And they have to impose that. And we see that in Canada as well. And these are the university educated elites, you know. So I just wonder if it's enough that the people, because I get a sense, I've been approached by many people. When I talk to them, I tell them I'm a journalist, and all of a sudden they want to tell me about this stuff. So when you're saying to me, the people are fed up, I've picked up on that. So whilst Norwich is non-confrontational and they're very polite at first and they're sussing it out, as soon as they know that you're sympathetic, it all comes out.
But
right?
this is the issue, and I think we were talking about this again earlier. Like, I'll talk to anyone. I don't care if you're left wing, I don't care if you're right wing, it doesn't matter to me, because we're constantly in this echo chamber and we're talking to the same people and they're getting out to the same audiences, right? So we've got, in order to win, we have got to be able to have discourse and have a conversation with left wing groups, organizations, media, etc. This is what Charlie Kirk was all about, you know. A lot of people these days are very, you know, wary when it comes to talking to the left. Talking to what they consider to be left-wing media outlets. And while, you know, left-wing media outlets like the BBC do lie, it's important that we get our, we do speak to them, we don't run them away, because that just looks really bad, right? So, I mean, yeah,
I want to touch on this discourse thing.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that happened at the protest is that I went to the police. I told the police who I was, what I was there for, that I was going to march with the marchers. I was a journalist from Canada. And then as soon as I was done, I was going to go speak to the counter protesters. They said, no worries. I repeated the same thing at the beginning of the march with the other police, said, no worries. And we did the march. I covered the protesters. I went straight to the counter protesters, and I was stopped by a police officer who absolutely would not let me speak to the very isolated other group of people on the other side. So he went to talk to them to, I guess, ask their permission if they wanted to speak to me. And I think, okay, that's fine. I'm not here to put cameras in people's faces. And I was told point blank that I was identified as being on the right or the right wing or the extreme right. I can't remember exactly what he said. And that they would not allow me to speak to the protesters. Now, the local journalist who was there, he spoke to everybody. So I guess he had some kind of acceptability pass, but because some people had made some assumptions about who I was. So you talk about dialogue, and I do see that with, I hate to call it the right and the left, but let's call it the people who are involved in this patriot movement that I've spoken to so far, right? I do see them wanting to engage in dialogue more. Now, what'll happen, and what did happen at the protest, is that they're also willing to speak their mind in an impolite fashion and quite in a blunt fashion and tell you they don't like you if they don't like you.
That's just the British, isn't it? Yeah.
But that's not just the British. That's a certain kind of British. Because then you have on the other side who would just refuse to speak to you at all because they want to maintain some kind of, that's the echo chamber that needs to be maintained.
Yeah.
Right? So you talk about dialogue, and I hope for the dialogue. I agree with you that there needs to be more dialogue. But are you confident that that's possible?
Yes. I am confident, but at the moment there's a massive division, not just in this country, but in every country across the West, right? I mean, let's look at the assassination of Charlie Kirk, right? So you've got the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Say it was Tyler James Robinson, I believe that was his name. We don't know yet because he hasn't been convicted of anything.
Shooter, yeah.
Right? Say it was him, yeah? You've now got people who are saying, oh God, it was someone who was dating a trans, and so we now got, you know, people are calling for civil war against the left. But who radicalized the left? Right, it's the state, it's the education system, etc. And so people quite obviously overlook who is truly responsible for a lot of what we're seeing across Western Europe, right? I think dialogue can happen. Dialogue is important. Without dialogue, wars happen, marriages fall apart, etc. Dialogue is extremely crucial to our democracy, right? I mean, behind dialogue, I would say, well, in front of dialogue, I would say that the most important fundamental right that we had was our right to guns, because without that, every other
those are gone. So what you guys don't know is that there are no guns in England other than the armed forces.
No, they do allow guns, but it's very controlled. So you're only allowed air guns and stuff like that. It's not like,
for the most part, the only people who have guns are the armed. It's like a section of police that are allowed to have guns. So most even police don't even have guns.
But once they take away that right, they start chipping away at every other right. And that's what's happened in the UK, right? They started taking away our free speech. Right?
So Canada's going through this right now. They're trying to take away all the guns in Canada.
Don't let it. Don't let it happen. Don't allow it. Honestly, that's kind of the downhill spiral. So from Tony Blair, you can see a lot of issues that have happened. But, you know, our main ones is that they've started chipping away at other rights, right? So, but in front of that, well, behind that, you've then got free speech, which is also another important right. Once they take away that, your right to protest goes. Everything else goes as well. So free speech is extremely crucial, and no functioning democracy can happen without the right to free speech and the right to protest. I'll give you an example. So you remember during COVID, right? There was a group called Public Child Protection Wales, and what the Welsh government was trying to do is they were trying to pass new RSE curriculum, and this RSE curriculum would teach kids about transgenderism, anal sex, etc.
Yeah, we have the same problem.
Exactly, disgusting topics, right? But because it was passed during COVID, PCP Wales, they organised a protest against it outside the Senate. they were arrested and charged for protesting during lockdown, for being out during lockdown, right? But in a functioning society, the way, so they're meant to pass a law, and you're meant to have a right to petition against it, protest against it, etc. If they banned protests, the entire democratic process no longer exists. They can just pass laws willy-nilly, right? So, your right to protest is extremely crucial.
Yeah, I want to touch on just one last thing before we wrap. Well, maybe a couple things before we wrap up. And that is digital ID and online controls. Because you're talking about free speech and protest and COVID, and the fact that we have the internet, people were able to communicate things. So when I arrived in England, the first thing that happened is Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever I tried to access told me that everything was going to be limited because they needed to check my age. Now, this is new because the last time I came 2 years ago, that wasn't a problem. That didn't exist.
It's called the online safety bill.
And I'm a journalist, and so when I want to put things out, it's important that they reach the audience. And I have been severely limited since I've been in this country.
See, the way I avoid that, by the way, and this is quite funny, is that I use a VPN that connects me to Canada, because Canada doesn't have that. So that's how I avoid the online safety bill. But you're right. I mean, if you look at Hong Kong, China, North Korea, etc., all of those countries, the government restricts your right to
because we're facing this. The reason I bring this up is so we're facing this right now. They're trying to pass this in our parliament at the minute. It's been ongoing. It's very controversial, and it would essentially completely curb or give the government the ability to take away your ability to access the internet, and also give the internet provider or stop the internet provider even saying that you've been taken off the internet. Right? I mean,
it's concerning. Like, this isn't just, Canada, the UK, etc. Every country across Western Europe eventually is going to try and do the same thing. Every country, right? The reason with pornography, so pornography was one of the precursors to it. They wanted to control internet access or porn access. There's easy ways you could do that. You could literally have it so you have to go into a shop to get a card, and you have to show your ID to access porn online. A lot of people wouldn't like to do that, but tough, right? It's better than having our right to internet access restricted, right? So now that they've got...
But that's a reason they're using, because it's the same, they're using children, but that's not the actual... If you look at the bills, that's not what's actually happening.
Well, this is it. So they originally start with, they just control your access to porn, your access to, there's quite a few other things, and, you're not allowed to say certain things on social media, which comes under, the online harms bill. But eventually it's going to move on to, oh, you can't say that, that's misinformation. Right, so I know this firsthand. If you pumped out misinformation regarding the Ukraine-Russia war, then you would not be allowed access to having ads on your websites using Google. Right, Google's the biggest place you get ads on websites. Right, so that was the what was it? So that, obviously they did that, and then you have COVID as well. You're not allowed to get monetized as a website if you put out COVID misinformation. Right, so eventually they're just going to start banning websites which pump out COVID misinformation, Ukraine, Russia misinformation, climate misinformation, etc.
It's the information the government doesn't want you to see, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. But people have, I'd say people have bought it, but even on the left, even on the right, no one has.
Yeah.
Me and you had a discussion about this earlier, but surely, if people, there's so much hate they can take, but no. The entirety of the UK has been against the online harms bill, against digital ID, and they've gone and done it anyway. To me, that is not a democracy. That is a dictatorship. If we look at Ukraine in 2013, the reason that the revolution happened was because you had the government. Originally it was to do with the EU. They wanted to go they wanted to go back into the EU. They voted for a president who said that he'd do it. He didn't, and then they passed a bunch of laws that stop you from protesting, stop you from wearing bike helmets, etc. Right, and stop you from wearing masks so you can hide your identity. And then the revolution happened. They are passing laws without the consent of the people. That is tyranny.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we could say let's go for a direct democracy like Sweden, but we know how that ended. Now they're all chipped. They're all chipped. They're all vaccinated. It didn't really work out well. So the answer is not that clear. But I think the American, the way that American has modelled their politics is actually quite smart. It's a constitutional republic. Democracy is more of a mob rule. So I wouldn't call the UK democratic. Democracy is mob rule. We're a monarch at the moment. I want us to go into I think constitutional republic like America is perfect. You know, you have a codified constitution, you have the amendments. I think that's a brilliant way of doing it, and that's the best way we can maintain our rights.
You said something about passing laws without the consent of the people, and I think let's just finish on digital ID, because this is something that has been just imposed. It's just been done. They just went, okay, now we're going to do digital ID. The Labour Party had their Labour Party conference in, was it Liverpool?
Yes,
Liverpool. And they just announced it. They just announced it, and it felt like, I know people are going to talk about digital ID and what it means, but it felt like a reaction to the Patriot movement. It felt like a means of grasping control where they felt like they'd lost it. I would love to know what you think about this digital ID situation.
Well, it is exactly how you described it there. So after the murder of 3 young girls in Southport, I'm not sure if you heard of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But context is good, because I follow this, but I don't know that many Canadians do. But these, why don't you explain it?
So a Welsh Christian choir boy, who was a black migrant, well, second generation immigrant from Rwanda, I believe it was. He went into a dance school, a Taylor Swift dance class in Southport, and he murdered 3 young girls and he stabbed a bunch of others. Right.
Yeah.
As a response to that, the UK rioted. Now, I didn't support when it first happened. I did a video and I basically said, don't go to these protests, because what's going to happen is they're going to provoke you into a riot, and then they're going to pass more laws that control us.
It was up and down the country. It was mostly in the north, but also in the south.
Yep.
It was violent. There was all these gangs of white Brits out protesting, and these gangs of Muslims out with knives, things like that. And it lasted, I don't know, about 3 days.
That's about a week.
There were some hotels that were firebombed, but there was also some people trying to attack other people with knives. Like, it's pandemonium. It
proper kicked off in the UK. There were proper riots. And to be honest, I can't blame anyone for what happened there. But as a response to that, the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer, he came out and he basically said, you know, I stand with the Muslim community. Yeah. We're going to increase facial recognition. And they've used facial recognition against me. I'm on bail. Yeah. You know, they've used that to search me a few times now. You know, it was going to increase facial recognition.
And this is the cameras that they have at protests, right? Yes. So these people going around in hats.
Not just that. I mean, like, I went to a concert recently, they had facial recognition there, and, you know, me and my girlfriend were pulled instantly and searched. Yeah. So they have facial recognition everywhere. And they don't have to tell you these days. So this is all stemmed from the protests during Southport. But what you find out is a lot of these people who went to these protests, like Peter Lynch, I believe, as well, they went to these protests, and they were the people who actually caused the riot. They weren't anyone new. Yeah. No one knew them, right? They were just, so what we think is establishment plants. I mean, you know, we go back to Ukraine in 2013, and the reason that riots happened there was because, and this has been admitted now, the government installed people to cause trouble, agitators.
Yeah, well, we know that happens in America too.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it happens in Canada
exactly
also.
And that happened here.
Yeah.
They got in agitators to cause a riot, and then they passed more laws to prohibit our freedoms, restrict our freedoms of movement, our freedom to protest. You know, so a lot of what's happening now with these Section 14s mainly is actually traced back to that. They don't want any more
so essentially
of these hotels being burned down.
What you're saying is that my feeling, or you agree with my feeling, that the digital ID is a response to the Unite the Kingdom movement, the Patriot movement, the raising of the flags.
Digital ID, they've actually been talking about this since 2005, perhaps even earlier, with Tony Blair, right? Tony Blair came in, he opened the floodgates of migrants coming in to the UK. He was talking about digital ID, and what was it? So digital ID, right? We've got a national insurance number. National insurance number allows us, is what gives us our right to work in the UK. We don't need anything else. But, you know, Tony Blair started talking about digital ID in 2005 as a solution to immigration, right? His son is developing the system that allows digital ID to work, which I find quite interesting, right? There's a little bit of nepotism going on there, So, you know, digital ID is absolutely disgusting. And the way it works, so we've got, I talked to you about this earlier. In the UK right now, most banking apps, they have your what they call a carbon footprint number.
It's like an actual number associated with your accounts.
Yeah, right. So it's how much petrol you're using, stuff like that. They have a carbon footprint number. When you purchase a train these days, it'll tell you about your carbon footprint, how much carbon is being emitted. That's all connected to your banking app. Now you've got a digital ID, you're going to have carbon footprint on there, and it's kind of like a social credit system.
Yeah.
It seriously is. It's like a social credit system. You've got a score there for how much petrol you're using in the name of climate change. By the way, carbon, good for the environment. Not bad, it's good for the environment. So you've basically already got a social credit score in this country already. Now you've got a digital ID. During COVID, they're going to say, oh, you're spending money outside your protest zone.
So if the government is willing to bring in this high control, low accountability program very swiftly at a conference without even engaging with his own parliamentary ministers or even discussing it in parliament. So I've actually seen Labour MPs denounce the digital ID. Like they've actually criticized it, right? So it's not just Conservatives, it's not just Reform, there's a lot of people criticizing, including their own ministers, because there was no discussion about it anyway. And so if you have a government who's willing to just say, okay, we're doing this now, we're not going to follow the proper protocols, we're just going to do it because that's what we want, well, then it does seem a likely assumption that they would also be willing to then control the population further, right? To impose whatever will they need to impose at the time. And now we have we have a managerial state in Canada. We also have a managerial state in the UK, this technocratic state that people talk about that might say, well, we're a little bit too high on our carbon credits this month, so we just need to tune that down. So we're just going to lower people's meat eating limits or whatever it is like that, right? So I don't know. I'm hopeful. The previous attempts to bring in a digital ID did not pass. It was completely poo-pooed. Everybody criticized it. That was maybe almost 20 years ago. So there is also a chance that will not go anywhere because of the enormous pushback that's been seen even just over the last few days. Rupert Lowe, I believe, who's an independent MP who used to be Reform, put out a letter, it was cross-party letter, many different parties signed on to that. And so there's hope that it won't actually pass. There is hope, but again, they've done so many things in the past without needing to pass it. It needs to pass legislation. So we are in a position where whether, you've got hundreds of MPs maybe against it, it doesn't matter. They will do it anyway. And that's my concern, is that they will do it anyway. We will have a digital ID. I mean, we've, over the past few hours, there's been a message that was sent to me. And what's happening now is that people are having a government ID check app pop up on their phone. It's not installed. It was never there before, but they are having a government ID check pop up on their phone. So it seems like they're doing it anyway. James, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for talking to me today. Thank you so much for having me. I've heard so many times that either America or Britain are 5 years ahead of Canada, and I have absolutely been convinced by this conversation that it is. Britain has been enacting all kinds of laws and policies that in Britain have just been imposed upon the people. And there's a window into what we can expect if we don't do anything about it. So if you enjoyed this conversation, if you got anything out of it, please like and subscribe and share it widely, because we don't want this to be happening in Canada. For True North, I'm Melanie Bennett.